All right, I'm back from my trip. Got back to New York. I don't know, by the time I got home, it was like 1:30 in the morning. Went to sleep, woke up around 7:30, worked out, went for a run. I know I talked to you guys a lot about my commitment to physical training and keeping fit and my routine. I wake up, 4 a.m., I go out. First of all, I work out at the gym, and then I go out shirtless. I don't care what the weather is, and I run. And I used to think like that's, a demonstration of toughness and resilience. And it's also kind of a mental thing, just to sometimes block out that cold and focus on what I'm doing. But after this trip, I have to say, and I'm still processing the whole thing. I'm still processing this whole thing. Like, I'm even questioning myself, like, why did I do it? Not because, was it a dumb idea or this and that, but I mean, what did I get out of it? I certainly learned some things about, primitive kind of survival skills, fire starting, building a shelter with something as simple as a tarp, or a natural shelter with wood and moss and leaves and covering and that kind of stuff. Water treatment. But the thing was, man, nothing like I've ever felt before. And I did some, like I said, I did some really tough things like the Grand Canyon hike in one day. That was very grueling, and it was very tough physically. It was also tough mentally, especially towards the end, getting back up to the top. I mean, you have to. But I mean, this trip in these conditions of constant, unending cold and wet and rain and mud, and it's where you're soaked through and through, and you cannot escape from it. And even the fires that we built, and we had one main fire that the team built, but the wood was too wet for that thing to really become a large raging fire where everybody could warm up. But those conditions, and I remember listening to some of these Navy SEALs when they were asked questions like, what was the toughest part of the training? And almost every single one of them, to a man, said it was the water and the cold, the wet and the cold. And that's exactly what I felt. First of all, like I said in my other video, my gear, I just had the wrong gear. Like, I didn't have outdoor gear. I wore like this kind of a bomber jacket, nylon, with underneath was just a cotton hoodie. And, the hoodie became soaking wet. The bomber jacket was wet through and through. Gloves, I had basically cloth gloves that became soaking wet, and my hands were so cold that they were useless. They were inoperative. I couldn't manipulate my fingers to do anything like strike a ferro rod to try to get some kindling to light up. I mean, it was, and then the nighttime, I have to tell you, the nighttime was the most, I don't even know what the word is, but I mean, uncomfortable, grueling experience, feeling that I've ever been through. I mean, under a tarp, I had a sleeping bag, which was shit. I don't know. I bought some sleeping bag on Amazon. It was supposed to be good down to like 0 degrees. It was about 37 degrees at night, so it wasn't like freezing, but it was raining. It was wet. The ground was soggy. It was damp. I had a pad, like one of these kind of yoga pads that I put down. The ground was very uneven. We were in the forest. It wasn't like a campsite or anything cleared out. So whenever I moved, there was like sticks or logs. I tried to move things out of the way. It was a tarp. Some people had tents. I went for the tarp method, and literally, and I was freezing. Like, I couldn't get into the sleeping bag. I had a problem with the zippers, so I just put it on top of me. and tried to hunker down underneath that. Meanwhile, my hoodie, I was wearing a hat, ski cap, and the hoodie was soaking wet, so my head was wet. Everything was wet and cold and freezing. And that the cold and the wet, I mean, there's no combination like that that is more uncomfortable. And I do every second I was like, I'm getting out of here. I got to get out of here. You know, our cars were parked not far away in a lot. I could have gotten up and driven off in the middle of the night if I wanted to, but I kept saying to myself, like, just go another half an hour. I didn't even want to look at my watch because I was afraid to look at my watch because it was going to say, like, hey, you got 6 or 7 hours until morning. And the sun was not coming up. I mean, it was a constant weather forecast of rain, the same conditions for the next day. And so, like, I don't know, like, the whole point I'm trying to say here is I'm still trying to process this. Like, what did it do for me? First of all, it gave me like an incredible appreciation of just the basic stuff that we have in our lives. I mean, most people, and I said this yesterday, you don't have to live in a fancy house or mansion or something like that. I mean, just the fact that we have heat, the fact that you can go, you know, flick a switch and you can cook a meal, you got fire or you have electricity. I mean, something like that, we just take that so much for granted. Or clean water. By the way, there were no toilets or anything like that, no porta potties. Everything was done outside. I mean, you just take all that stuff for granted. You know, we're very, very lucky. Very, very lucky. But the other thing, it gave me such an appreciation. Like, nature is brutal. And when you think about animals that live outside, which they all do, I mean, they live outside 24/7, you know, very few of them have like shelter, maybe some kind of very primitive. I mean, nature is so goddamn tough. I mean, it teaches you a lot. I mean, the other thing is it's kind of funny in a way. It's kind of ironic because I always talk about, oh, I live in this big city, New York. I can't stand it. I love being in nature. I think I don't want to be in nature now for a while. I had my fill of nature. Okay, I'm happy to be back in a big city where everything is right here at my fingertips. I mean, you know, and wherever you live, and I know probably a lot of you live in places, you know, far less urban or you know, suburban or even rural, you still have it like way, way, way better than you think, you know. As rough as your lifestyle might be, maybe by design, like you figure, hey, I'm out in the rural, I don't know where, and you know, I chop my own wood and I got a stove inside and blah blah blah. I mean, it is nothing like outdoor survival and really, really, really dealing with the harshest kind of nature. And by the way, I go back to what these Navy SEALs say about the worst conditions they feel is the cold and the water, the wet and the cold. You can be in very cold temperatures and it's dry and you can get dry wood and you can build a fire, a good fire. And it is much more, to deal with that, I think is a lot easier than just being soaked through and through in the cold and the wet. Anyway, that's my update. You know, it's going to take me a while to still process this whole thing, but I'm happy to be back in a big city, man. I really am. It was one of the first times when I came back from the airport, and it was nighttime, but I was driving back and I saw the, you know, Manhattan skyline, and I'm like, man, I'm happy to be back. All right, everybody, have a great day. Bye.